AITA for taking the vegetables of my kids' burgers. NTA, your husband is setting your kids up to have a horrible relationship with food. They are kids, they eat when they want, and should have a say in what goes into their body. This unhealthy relationship with food, this is so important beyond what some parents may know. Associating upset and even shame with food is putting this poor child on an incredibly dangerous road. It's not just about the husband being super controlling, which he is, like Jude. Yikes. There's a lot to unpack there. It's about how this will seriously mess up their child more than they might know. I pray this poor girl isn't develop an eating disorder. That may sound extreme, but that is a highly likely outcome of this. Couldn't agree more. They also took their kids out for a treat, but husband couldn't let it slide that she must eat veggies and not enjoy even one meal the way she wanted. Not to mention how much nutrition is in a piece of iceberg lettuce and a probably unripened tomato. She wouldn't be missing much. Basically no real nutrition in iceberg lettuce and a slice of tomato. Dad should have let Emily get the burger she wanted. Op already mentioned that this type of meal was very rarely eaten by their family. Dad's extreme views of food are only going to ensure that, as soon as the kids get older, they will be focusing on eating all the foods they never got at home. Yeah, burger toppings are definitely not a serving of vegetables. So he's ruining her burger for literally no reason. NTA, he says he is looking out for your daughter, whilst ignoring her other emotional needs that come with being neurodivergent. It's not even just emotional needs. A lot of people with food sensitivities will straight up take no food over trigger food, because it's not worth the discomfort/pain that comes from being forced to eat something that sets off sensory issues. Which is what was happening until Op stepped in. Definitely NTA. NTA. This is setting your child up to have an unhealthy relationship with food. This is so important to understand. Associating upset and even shame with food is putting your poor child on an incredibly dangerous road. It's not just about the husband being super controlling, which he is, like Jude. Yikes. There's a lot to unpack there. It's about how this will seriously mess up your child more than you might know. I pray this poor girl isn't develop an eating disorder. That may sound extreme, but that is a highly likely outcome of this. Right parenthesis. Posted something very similar to this in another reply. I just truly hope it top reads it. Hi. I read this, and your comment, and I truly appreciate. I'm trying to get my husband that by forcing the kids to eat things they have sensory issues with is not looking out for them and will only harm them. I've decided to look into counseling for my oldest too, because of the influx of suggestions. Thanks so much for your comment. Yeah, as a neurodivergent kid, my parents weren't even healthy nuts, but they did ignore my sensory issues tied to food the same way your husband ignores your daughter. They'd always tell me eat it or starve. So I starved. Fell into a plethora of eating disorders through the years, and have a horrible relationship with food. Please don't let him do that to her. It's the worst feeling in the world, and at 18 I've barely made it into recovery enough to eat without panicking. Me too. Ugh. They forced me to eat things I hated. I never make my kids eat things they don't like. NTA greater than Emily looked like she was about to cry. She's neurodivergent, and a lot of food tastes and textures really bother her, tomatoes being a large one. The husband doesn't seem to carry that. Insisting on a treat meal containing a food the kid can't stand is just about control and is cruel. It's literally putting food ideology before her total well-being. If vegetables were so important, why didn't he tell her, before ordering, that she had to pick a vegetable with her meal? What your husband actually taught your kid is because he said so. Because if vegetables were the main part, he would have asked her to pick a vegetable as a side dish to have with her bacon burger. Even if he'd forgotten beforehand, he could have asked her what vegetable she picked. He didn't. He decided to punish a 12-year-old because she didn't pick a treat meal healthy enough to his liking, and ordered a food that makes her unable to eat a meal. He's 100% the R. I have 4 kids. Restaurant meals and parties, we do not insist on eating anything other than what they will actually eat. Why create a problem where there isn't one? And yes, at least one of my kids pretty much ate only sugar at parties for years. Getting the kid to eat nutritious meals consistently was far more important than policing parties and restaurants. Absolutely this about going out, as long as you don't eat out all the time. One dodgy meal every fortnight/month is not a major issue. My toddler eats chips and chicken nuggets every time we're out, because that's what she reliably eats. At home, we make a good effort to get a nice mix of nutritious food into her, but parties or outings are not the time to challenge your kid with new/not easy foods. NTA obviously up, but your husband is being at best wildly counterproductive, and mostly straight up cruel and controlling. I am glad to see your edit saying you'll seek professional help for your daughter. Get them to help you with a plan, and if your husband won't stick to it, you may need to consider how healthy he is to be dictating things to your kids. NTA, but your hubby is. First of all, a tomato is a fruit, and second, lettuce has very little nutritional value. Why not just order a side of veggies with her burger instead of insisting on having them as a burger topping? The certain restaurant that we went to didn't have a huge menu, so the only side options were fries or chips, so I think that he decided that putting vegetable on the burger was his only option. A slice of tomato and a leaf of lettuce does not automatically make a cheeseburger healthy. For one meal, your kid can have a treat. Your husband should focus on an overall rule about eating vegetables that your North Dakota kid can handle, instead of this weird rule for a single burger. Yeah, as somebody who struggles with an eating disorder and clinical OCD, this thing bothers me like mad. It very clearly presents the idea that vegetables are good, and foods like hamburgers are bad. He literally created a scenario where a hamburger can only be consumed if it is cancelled out by a good food. This behavior can, and likely will, create horribly disordered eating. For example, at my worst, I could only eat good foods, and in small portions. Eating disorders are the most fatal mental illness by statistics. Info: why are you with a man who doesn't care about your child's disability? If I'm being honest, our relationship has been struggling lately. I've been trying to convince him to go to couples counseling, but he has been refusing. We are trying to work it out by ourselves, but it's been really hard. This really pushed me over the edge, so I'm particularly mad about this one. He clearly isn't worried about working it out, if he isn't even willing to consider seeking professional help, even for the sake of his own children's development. NTA: a piece of tomato and leaf of lettuce doesn't magically make a burger healthy. Tell your husband to not be such an overbearing dick. If he was that eager to have the children eat veggies, restaurants do have beans, corn, and always a side salad. NTA: and as a child therapist who is specifically helping one of my quite young clients deal with the beginnings of disordered eating, what your husband is doing is exactly how you give your kid ed. Google stuff on preventing eating disorders in children, intuitive eating, and North Dakota kids and food. They have different guts, tend to need a lot more fiber, and deserve pleasure and ease in their eating, especially on special occasions. His plan will not teach them to eat vegetables. It will teach them they cannot count on him to listen to them about their bodies, which has far more serious repercussions as your kids get older and have medical concerns, sex and style questions, get bullied or assaulted, etc. Hopefully, of course, none of those things happen, but if they do, want kiddo to trust their own body and trust their safe adults to listen to them. A child therapist would be so helpful. We do a lot of parent education and help with taking differing goals and approaches and finding strategies that are healthy for kiddos and work for the parents. You didn't ask for all that advice, but suffice it to say again, NTA and your kids are lucky to have you advocating for them, even when it's really uncomfortable for you. I am rooting for you all. I'm in the same situation as Op. How would you approach an unreasonable husband to even get him to start rethinking his insane methods? It helps to have a neutral third party sometimes, so it isn't feel quite as personal. I usually try to start with a place of shared values. Everyone in this room cares a whole lot about this kiddo and wants them to be happy and healthy and successful in life, right? Okay, so we're all on the same team. Now let us look at what works and what isn't, and what science has shown, some of which is obvious and some of which is super counterintuitive. We have learned so much recently through brain scans and cutting-edge methods that a lot of what we thought we knew about how humans work was wrong. So everyone is figuring out new ways to update and adapt how we be humans and raise kids and work and be a citizen now. It's so different than it used to be. Can we look at this one issue and take it apart and see if we can figure out what we can tweak to help you have an easier time helping your kiddo face their fears, or be brave, or whatever it is? Some parents are hard to work with for sure, but most parents, if they are opting into therapy for their kid especially, want to think of themselves as the kind of brave parent who wants the best for their kid, even if it means changing their mind. If you give people a positive story to account for changing their mind about something important, most people stop being afraid to change their mind when presented with compelling evidence. Thank you so much for taking the time. I like the establishing of everyone really being on the same team, Team Kiddo. That gives me something to work with. BC deep down that is my husband's motivation. His methods are the issue, not his motives. Absolutely. I think a lot of men don't know how to love their kids except through forcing them to be good. It's like a Hulk smash attempt at parenting. It's not toxic masculinity, but it's also usually a deeply intense and probably confusing nurturing protective instinct that they have never been taught how to navigate. When they can have someone see that intensity/control as them doing absolutely everything they can to make their kid's lives the best. When they can feel like they are doing that most important bit of parenting right, then they are just the most enthusiastic about upgrading and changing and implementing changes. This is a wild generalization, and it's of course more complex than this with so many factors. But I believe we all want someone to see how hard we're retrying and how much we care. Good luck. Being a human is really hard, and you're doing a good job trying to grow and be more kind and more loving. Gold star. AITA, but let me be clear, I don't think you are an asshole in general. I think you sound like a parent doing their best in a pretty crappy situation. A situation your husband has created. However, the long-term solution is not for you to be taking things of burgers and winking at your kids. You and your husband need to get on the same page with this, and what I really mean is that your husband needs to get on a different page. In fact, he needs to open a whole new book. This could set up a whole range of issues for your kids and their relationship with food. It could also set up a whole range of issues with your kids and their needs and wants not being listened to. This is actually a hill to die on. Stand up to your husband for the sake of your kids. Don't keep doing things behind his back. Let him know how things should and will be. You need to both work together with your kids in regards to food and eating. What do they like? What can they actually not tolerate? How can they have a balanced and nutritional diet that takes all this into account? And what are their favorite "just because I like it" foods? Had to come too far to find this. I'd go with Ash. Because if you're taking the kids out to eat as let's have fun day, you should let them have fried oil and sugar with fried ice cream, if that's what they want, particularly if it's not often. and have them eat a balanced meal every other day of the year. But I don't think you'll get very far by making the dad a bad guy in secret. I was going to vote not the R, because your husband is going about this wrong and setting up disordered food relationships. P.S. It's also a violation of your daughter's trust to try to force her to eat things that trigger her sensory issues. But you should have had this conversation with your spouse much earlier. How will you handle your daughter's sensory issues when it comes to nutrition without being controlling over food? It's also super disrespectful to your husband to deal with the problem behind his back, not to mention terrible modeling for your kids. Someone is insisting on something you don't like or is wrong. Pretend to let them have their way, and then do what you want. Ugh. That puts up into our territory for me. Then on our way would have been to say, vegetables are important, but she decently have to eat those. We can talk about this later. Yes, Op wasn't solving the problem, she was escalating it. Have a discussion, then next time pack some apples when you go out, because his point about healthy eating is correct. And do this when the daughter is 3. You need to take your husband to whoever he'll listen to and convince him to stop this behavior. His mother, a therapist, show him this post, whoever. Because this is not how you teach your kids to make good food choices. This is how you give your child an eating disorder. And she already has difficulty with certain foods. I'm going with because this needs to be addressed with your husband, rather than teaching your daughter to start hiding things from her parents. Yes. Dear God, thank you. Yes. Somehow everyone is responding here, only focusing on the daughter-mother aspect and protecting the kid, completely ignoring that the only relationship in this question is husband-wife. Husband-kid relationship is a total fail, no question, and is the bigger issue, arguably, in this situation. But how Op is handling the wife-husband side of it is so disrespectful. I can't imagine how it doesn't teach the kid. Learn how to play one parent against the other, and the best way to eat what you want is to make people feel guilty or sneak errand behind their back. Apostrophe. I grew up in a household with my mom much like you. Me and her had, and still have, a super close relationship with her, but she regularly went behind my very loud dad's back to appease me. I wish she didn't do as much now that I see how much she felt like she sucker punched him every time. Your husband can and should give your daughter more control over what she eats. I'm in a similar situation as your mom was, but my kid is still young. What would you have had your mom do differently? I could really use advice. I really feel insufficient here. I'll be honest. I really think time and maturity is a big component. My mom was a great communicator, but my dad didn't listen well, and well-intentioned feedback wasn't particularly received well. And as much as she loved me and my sister, she kept my dad at a distance with some of her behavior, like the stuff we're talking about. They were locked in a long-term relationship from a young age, and were slowly growing apart. My dad has since learned how to communicate so much better with his second wife. My mom, meanwhile, has a long-term boyfriend who's ginda-ho-hum, but is stable as a horse house. At this point, I realize their divorce was basically bound to happen, and has greatly influenced my ideals about a single soulmate/partner forever, because they got together as teens and by 40, were completely different people who didn't align as they did decades earlier. I wish I had better and more helpful words. Your relationship, however, is not their relationship. I wish the best to you all. Thank you. Sounds like there was a lot going on, and the food issue was just one of the problems. Info, is he their father? The wording of the post made it unclear. Yes, he is. NTA. Bluntly speaking, lettuce and tomato on a burger isn't vegetable. In fact, tomato is fruit, don't get me started, and plain lettuce has no nutritional value other than a little fiber. All you really did by removing the lettuce and tomato was to make it possible for your daughter to enjoy eating her burger. Your husband sounds a bit insane. First, he's so obsessed with nutrition, but thinks that it's possible to make a burger healthy. Second, if your daughter eats a burger the way she wants to eat a burger, he thinks that's a violation of trust. Where is the contract your kids signed stating that they will eat everything Dad says, and only what Dad says, forever, under penalty of painful death? Farsipum. In fact, tomato is fruit. Don't get me started. I wish we as a society could go back to the way things were before everyone read fun fact. Tomatoes are botanically fruits on Facebook or Tumblr back in like 2010, and decided to chime in with this useless pedantic shit whenever anyone mentions tomatoes. Look at the positives. It's a good way for people without any critical thinking skills to advertise themselves, so you immediately know they don't have to be taken too seriously. NTA. As someone who once threw up because my parents made me eat raw tomato, it's hard to describe how big a deal I don't like this can be. Nothing about what your husband is doing is productive. Twisting kids' arms to eat arbitrary vegetables isn't going to make them eat vegetables long term, which is the most important thing. You need to teach kids that some vegetables are good, actually, and that they need to seek those out. As for contradicting your husband, it takes two to tango. If your partner makes a bad call and isn't listening to reason, your hands aren't tied to blindly follow their lead. I don't know what it is about raw tomatoes, but they make my skin crawl. The texture makes me gag. I'd rather not eat at all than eat something with raw tomato, just like Hopper's kid. NTA.